Hi, this is Kylie Koo. Welcome to my studio. And welcome to Wild Positivity, my positivity project for 2019. And our word for this month of January will be adventure. And I'm so pleased that so many of you have said that you're going to join in again with this positivity project. So let me just say a little bit at the start. I will very much be guided by those wild cards that I created at the end of the positivity deck, and I'll be drawing on my deck throughout this 12-month series. So in particular at this point I'm thinking about the slow down phase, really reminding myself of all those cards that were in there, things about relaxing, about self-love, self-care, sanctuary, etc. But I'm going to draw on some other cards too. From the rise state of being, I'm letting awaken and energy guide me. And from creative, envision, brave and wander. And also from gratitude, I've picked the card Earth. So these are the cards that are going to guide me in creating my first page in this journal, this wild positivity journal. So I took that simple sketchbook that I showed you a couple of weeks ago in the introduction, and all I've done is to take some of the pages out because I didn't need them all, and I've simply rebound it, and I've gone over all the pages with a clear gesso, so they're quite textured feeling at the moment. In future I will want to actually do a bit more to that journal, but that's all for the time being. Now here I am looking at adventure and what I want to do, and I felt today that I wanted to use some collage pieces, so I'm just kind of looking at a couple of pieces here that I might use. This woman came from a magazine. It felt a very strong image to me, and I wanted to also use something that would give me the sense of adventure. Now, I need to tell you that my film today reached almost 3 hours. I had almost 3 hours of footage. So I have had to put some of this at double speed, and I have had to cut some pieces out. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to take all that 3 hours of footage, or almost 3 hours, and do a much more in detail process type video, just for those of you that might be interested. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to put it on kind of double speed or if I'll talk through all. Let me know if you have any thoughts on that. But here I am anyway, just looking at where I'm going to start. I am going to do these one page after the other. But I've got 3 colours here: turquoise, mint green, periwinkle. Sorry, I do have a 4th, which is a pale blue. And all I want to do is to get a kind of background wash on. I use 3 of the colours initially, and then I come back and add a little bit of turquoise, and I do use some water to spread them out. Now I don't use too much water because the pages it's not a thick paper, but the fact that they've been gessoed helps a bit. So yes, adventure. So I'm thinking here about really preparing for what lies ahead, this new journey. And for me, this is about a journey of self-discovery. I'm thinking this year that it's about finding my authentic self. It's about self-realization. Now, a lot of kind of buzzwords in there, I know. And, all I would do is invite you to think about what those mean for you. I was trying at the end of last year just to kind of set out why I've picked wild positivity and what I kind of meant by wild. And wild was very much about getting back to self. And I think Laura Gregain, and I'll put a link to her channel below, she left me a comment, and I think it was something along the lines of, Are you saying it's about finding the essence of ourself? It was something like that. I'm slightly paraphrasing. And that's it. We are changed to an extent by the people we come in contact with, by the relationships we have, by the jobs that we hold. All of that kind of changes us, and in certain circumstances we will act in a particular way, and that's all good and well. But sometimes I just fear that, for me anyway, there's a little bit of me lost in some of that, and I know that I do kind of recover some of it in my art. And I just thought that for this year's project, it's about finding more of that, about going back to self. So, just jumping back into the process here, I decided that background was just a little bit too bright for me, so just taking some gesso, applying it with this fan brush. I don't want it on too thick, but equally, I want to just kind of tone down that background a bit. So one of the things that struck me is that, of course, we change over time and we grow over time. But sometimes I just wonder if we maybe lose some things, some aspects of ourselves over time. And that's what I'm looking to try and get back to this year. So I hope that's enough of a kind of introduction at the moment, but I will probably touch on bits as we go through. So once more, I'm just looking at these two pieces. I did like that piece because it had adventure on the back, which was the word that I'd chosen. But the more I looked at this giant rock face, the more I felt called to that. Why? I don't know. Partly the colour seemed to fit in with the woman's jacket here, and maybe partly because I used to do rock climbing, so I look at rock like that and I can feel it almost in my fingertips, the way I used to climb the rocks. So whether it was that, whether it was the colours, I don't know, but I just felt more drawn to that at the end. So I'm just taking some scraps. This was a piece that I'd done some spirograph on, just using these and just trying to pull together various pieces of collage to make this interesting. I don't want the piece to be too literal. It's about adventure. I want to give a sense of adventure, but by the same token, I don't want it to be too literal. And, I really got into this piece, and I guess that's why it took me so long to do it. And just putting various pieces in place here to see where I think that they fit. Now, if you're joining in with me, you do what feels right for you. In terms of adventure for me, I'm also mindful of the word that I've picked for this year. I sometimes don't pick a word for the year, and I didn't consciously sit down to pick a word for the year this time, but the word gentle kept coming into my mind. I'd be thinking about things and I'd be thinking gentle. And therefore I've decided that this kind of journey of self-discovery for me, this adventure, has to be gentle in a way. So I'm kind of mindful of that, despite the fact that adventure can be a word that sounds like, you throw everything into it, you don't stop, you're totally going for it, it's scary, it's all of those things. Yes, this is going to be exciting, I feel, but by the same token, I want it to be gentle. And I think that's why I was drawn to this picture of this woman that I'd taken from some magazine or other a while ago. I don't even know what it was in. I know the piece was to do with technology, which is why she has that red thing in her ear, which I thought I would get rid of, but I leave in the end. So, I had this notion of her just kind of looking towards this mountain. This is her adventure. This is my adventure. And I'm just kind of looking out there. I'm preparing myself. I'm getting ready for it. And I would invite you to think about what that adventure will mean for you. How are you going to prepare for it? Are you throwing yourself into it? Or are you going to go gently into it? So that piece I took out there, it felt too sharp. And again, I think that's partly to do with the gentle, despite the fact that the rock there, that mountain is sharp, it has jagged edges. There was a sense of wanting some of the pieces to be smoother, rugged but smoother. So I've now glued them all down into place. I cut out the gluing out process. You know how to glue, you don't need to see that. And now all I'm doing is taking some clear gesso and I'm going over all the pieces. I then happened to see that piece of washi tape. It just had a little red on it, and I felt there was a need for a couple of pieces of red. You'll see I stuck that piece of collage with red on it up there. Later on I will change that a little because it just jarred with me. But I felt there just needed to be some little touches of red in there. So I'm using a gel matte medium to stick everything down. It's a heavy kind of glue in a sense. I felt that I needed a little bit more than a glue stick on this occasion. So I'm taking these colours, some indigo, some Payne's grey and some raw umber, and just going to put them onto my little jelly plate here. And I'm just going to start working away in the background. And to start with, all I'm going to try to do is to blend in the collaged pieces a little bit more, just so that they all become part and parcel of this same piece of art. So I put down the base colour to begin with, simply because I wanted something down there rather than just sticking the pieces down. But when you come to do it, you do whatever you feel is right for you. Now, I used my positivity deck cards at the start. If you didn't do the positivity deck, or if you're still working on yours, that's fine, just work away at that, but you don't need them for this. I have just decided that I want to use those cards to help guide me on my adventure this year. And that was why I looked through all my cards at the start and just looked at which ones will guide me here. As I say, the wild positivity cards, the wild cards from my positivity deck will be my guide through all of this. So just building up some blues in the background using the Payne's grey, the indigo and the white. Mixing them in, just trying to get everything to blend, getting into the little valley there where the pages dip. Starting to create some shapes, and you see I go back to that. That felt like something there. Don't know what, but I just felt like it. Going back to it and just playing there for a little bit longer. And I'd very much encourage you to do, whatever calls to you in terms of adventure. This was it for me. Yours might look entirely different. If you want to do something similar, go and do it, whether you have the exact same images is unlikely, but, pull similar images if you want. But just do whatever calls to you. And I don't know why I incorporated those kind of spirograph type images. Again, they just called to me. There was something about the pattern that I just felt needed to be included with this page. So As I go on from here, you will see that I add more colour to the background, and what I will go on to do is to work on the woman's face. A very beautiful face, striking in many ways, but I wanted to make her my own. She isn't changed so significantly, but you know, it just had to be, or she just had to be a little bit different. So just showing you there the little bit that I did, just using that little bit of Punchinella. Because the other thing about this page is, you know, I'm trying to capture for myself what I mean by adventure. And I'm doing that in a way that, because I love mixed media, I'm using mixed media to express that. And again, just using it there in other places. Kind of smoothing that out there, and almost this another orb almost starting to form. Now, I had looked through some magazines for images beforehand, and I suspect, actually, I had filmed that bit to show you the various images that I'd looked at, but you'll see some of them, I think, probably appearing in future weeks. And again, if you want me to do the full video, then you'll see in that how I've actually chosen the pieces. So now just taking a pencil and just kind of going around some of that, just making it a little bit clearer, just round the orbs at the moment. And that's just a normal standard HB pencil. Now starting to work on her face. And I was just basically using some of the paints that I'd already mixed for other areas, just using them on her face. Just getting a layer down that I can then work on top of. Now, when I put her down, she was just quite thin paper and it did wrinkle a little bit. But you know, I'm not worried about that, and in fact, she has a kind of mark on her face. You can see it just under her eye that goes all the way down through her neck, and you know, to me that just signified, I don't know, something slightly imperfect. I think it just called to me as well that this was not a perfect photoshopped face, if that makes sense. So now just starting to put in some darker shades just to get the just trying to, you know, look at her face as it was before, where there was kind of light and shade, just trying to build in some of that character. I'd used a pencil just to make sure that I didn't lose her main features. And what I'm very keen to do here is just to try and get that kind of notion of the dark patches and then the lighter patches, just to add, it's not about making the face realistic, but just trying to make it less flat, I guess, on the page. Now obviously I could have tried to draw this face freehand and just use this as a reference, but I decided I would just stick it down and paint on top of it. I do try to blend out those hard edges in places. But all of it's just about trying to build the character of the face. Now working on her hair. Just mainly using that raw umber and some white. Just going over it, this being the base layer. And now taking some of this cadmium red hue. And just mixing it a little bit with the raw umber. Just getting some more colour into the hair. Partly for interest, but partly also because, you know, this is my kind of wild woman, my gentle wild woman. So this is how I felt I needed to represent her for adventure. Not that there needs to be a woman in it. If you're a man watching this, you might put a man in here. You could put an animal in here. You don't even need to have a living being in here. It's whatever the word adventure conjures up for you. So again, just mixing some little bits and pieces on my jelly plate there. And what I'm going to do now is I think I'd added some little bits of pink to her face there, but what I'm going to do now is to make a kind of glaze, and I'm just using that medium there, and I'll mix it in with some paints. And this is just a Naples yellow. I actually had to cut open my tube just to get right into it, and I'm just showing you here. I have to open that up, it's stuck at the top, but just showing you how I actually go on to make a glaze using that glaze mix and the paint itself. So just mixing my glaze, and I'm trying to get a tone that will kind of sit on her skin, but also that I can use in other parts. So I'm giving it a good mix. That Naples yellow was quite lumpy, so I had to give it a good mix round, take some out, thin it down a bit more, and later on you'll also see me adding some of the cad red to bits of it, just to give me another tone again. Now I like to use the glazes for a number of reasons. One, when you add the mix to it, it allows you a longer time for the paint to dry and let some blending go on a little bit differently, but it also gives a nice kind of glossy sheen to it, and it's just nice to work on. And I just felt that for this a glaze would be nice, so I'm really just trying it out there just to see how the colour works out. And at this point I'm starting to see these as kind of rocks and almost kind of gully in between that might need to be traversed. Maybe another kind of small mountain down the bottom there. So there I go, start to use it on her face. And what it does is, I think it kind of knocks some of the dark shadows into the background a little bit, starts to make it not realistic, but helps it blend in. So again, I've had to jump forward there just to let you see where I've got to. So I did take off that piece of red that was up the top. It was bothering me. It just jarred with me. So just using the umber just to fill in the mountain again, and I just start to play with this and start to make another orb. Now, as I say, if you are interested to see how I did her face in more detail, then do let me know and I will make that longer video. I can either do it as a video at speed, which you can watch it all, which you could also slow down, or I'm quite happy to sit and talk through each and every step. Just let me know if you do want to see it. I'll probably put it up anyway at some point in the not too distant. So I start to paint that in. It's suddenly another orb, although a little later on I start to feel that there's just too many orbs there. I'm not quite sure what they are and why they're there, and it starts to feel a little bit cluttered, so I will change things up a little bit. But that blue that I put round there, I think it was just the indigo again, I started to put that little bit up in that corner. So just thinking now that I actually want to make a bit of a kind of blue glaze for the top. I'm just going to use some of that indigo, which is hard to get out the tube, and I think I ended up putting more on myself than actually went in there, but mixing that with some of that medium again, that allows me to create a glaze. And I start to apply this to some of those areas that look kind of like sky, I guess. So when I sat down to create this piece today, I didn't actually think, I mean, I never set myself a time scale for things, but I realised that I really got into it, and you know, that's a good thing. So you can see me here, I start to apply some other colours, mainly white, with just a little bit of the blue that's still mixed on there, and I start to take out that orb. It just felt too much cluttering the sky there. And later on I started to wonder, what are these about? Are they celestial bodies? Are they perhaps portals into something else? I don't know. But it was good just to kind of think about, what is this representing? The page kind of said to me that there is perhaps a destination, the destination being that mountain, perhaps being the top of the mountain. There's a challenge, perhaps climbing the mountain, but perhaps some challenges in between, perhaps some smaller adventures in between. If those are orbs, what are they? If they're portals, where do they lead? But lots there to kind of get into further. So now just using some white a second ago just to get the highlights on her face. Again, taking the highlights that were in the original picture, but they just seem to fit well, you know, as if the light is just on that other side of her. Perhaps the light's on the other side of that mountain, that rock face. And just adding those touches of white. Just putting some water on that so I can then lift it. It was just a little bit, my paintbrush was dry and I really just wanted the lines there to be just a little bit finer. I like too that this image had the scarf around her neck, as if she's ready for adventure, perhaps to slightly colder climes, perhaps to hot climes, and needs the scarf to protect. So put some white highlights in her hair there, and now just taking this pen in sepia and just going around some of those circles there. Adding a bit of interest to that particular orb. And again, as I was doing this, it was kind of saying to me there's things to be looked at in there. And again, the one at the top. And what I liked about this was there was so many layers to it. There was that original spirograph type drawing below it, there was then colour on top of it, and then these kind of circles on top of that again. Just kind of doing some of the almost finer details now with that pen. Really into these sepia pens at the moment rather than black. Again, that maybe represents the kind of notion of gentle, rather than going for black, going for sepia. So if you're in the Facebook group, and I'll leave the link to that below, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave it in the comments below as well. But, you know, if you do this and you post an image, let me know what adventure meant for you. As I say, for me, it's very much at this stage about preparing for the adventure. It's about looking ahead to it. It's about a level of excitement. So just taking a gold pen now, I felt I wanted to highlight a few things again, as if there was something just shining on these things, on that little mountain at the bottom, on the orbs, as if there was just something, some sort of golden light that was hitting these things. Just a light from somewhere hitting them. Is it elusive? Will I find it? I don't know. But I think I'm going to enjoy looking for it. Now I do want to make clear that when I say I'm kind of looking for this, looking for authentic self, it's not about not being happy with the here and now. It's definitely not. It's more just about is there something I need to re-find? So just using little bits of gold on her hair as well. I liked a little bits of white. I mean, that said two things to me. One, it was about light hitting it, but perhaps it was also about, let me see, how do I put it? An age and wisdom. And that wisdom being reflected in perhaps a few grey hairs here and there. So just trying to get that little corner bit of that orb, that little fraction up there, just trying to do a bit more with that. It felt like it needed to be a little bit brighter. So I play about with that for a little while. And in a moment I'll actually bring out some gold paint, glorious gold. And I don't want it too thick, I don't want it too bright, but I want a sense of that being perhaps a thing that's giving that kind of golden light to other things. This bit suddenly started to look like sand to me, which I liked that notion of there being the blue, which might have been the sea, then the sand, then that rock face, these things to be passed through perhaps, and also the sky, and also the things in the sky to be negotiated. So at several points here I thought I might be finished, but then just felt that something else was needed. So taking these pip pens, this one is called Light Flesh, I'm just using it a little bit on her lips there. Just adding little tiny bits of detail. Now these pens are now sitting on top of a glaze. This one's umber, and you know, as I'm working with them, I know that they're kind of sliding across the glaze a little bit. So what I'll probably do is to take some sort of fixative. Once this is fully dry, I'll probably take a fixative and just try and secure these. At the moment I use it to effect in terms of just trying to use it to colour a bit. It's sliding well across the glaze. But there is a possible danger, for want of a better word, that it actually just slides off completely. So I might just use a fixative on it. But I just had a sense here that they needed to stand out just that little bit more. Just adding more where I feel it needs it. Now taking the ivory, just feeling that this one in the sky needs a little bit more. it doesn't show up an awful lot. This bit didn't actually have a glaze on it, so it went on slightly differently. Using the gold around that, but I'll smudge it a little bit in a second. I don't want it to be too solid on there. And I quite like the effect that that creates. So, now about to do my word to add that. And I'm just going to use these alphabet stamps and again this sepia ink. I'm going to use this book page that I had tea dyed a while ago and just going to use that little bit down the bottom to stamp on. Won't show you all, but there's adventure. I used a capital V deliberately. I just wanted it to look a little bit uneven. So I'll go around that with the sepia ink pad. And then I'm going to use some of the gel matte medium just to glue it in place. Now I know at this point that it's likely that some of the pip pen will lift, but I just actually use that to my advantage. In a moment you'll see me dip into it just to actually start to lift some of the colour to then ever so slightly darken the word. And to me that just helps it fit in just that little bit more. And I just smooth that in a little bit more. And so that is more or less it. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you will join me for this year's wild positivity, and that you will create your adventure page. You could still do it as a card if you wanted and add it to your deck, entirely up to you. So thanks for watching, bye for now, and see you in February.